First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Wadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter, which Paul addresses, a few things here concerning manner of conduct, in the spirit. And also, using examples of, Israel in the wilderness to highlight the fact that, just because you were exposed to the Spirit, or the Lord's divine workings, and that doesn't guarantee you, it's not the same as having obedience and faith, right, and in the right ways, because even Israel, even though they saw all of those things, a lot of them were still destroyed of the Lord, all right? So Paul uses that as an example to say that the Lord had those things happen, and we can learn from that not to behave like they did, but rather having the mercy and grace of the Lord showed upon us in this time to utilize it, learning from their mistakes. So this is 1 Corinthians 10:1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, right? And this goes to show you that those in the church of Corinth were Israelites, because here, though Paul mentions, or when you read about the way they're classified, you had, quote, Jews, right? Israelites that knew they were Israelites that were a part of the church. You also had those that were called Gentiles, which were Israelites that originally didn't know they were Israelites. They weren't raised in that way, all right? And so they lived like pagans. But here he says that all our fathers, okay, because at one point they were, of the fold, but through the different things that we went through, a main portion of that being the Hellenization during the reign of the Greeks, a lot of Israelites fell away from their nationality and their heritage, and now had to be brought back. So as he says here, right, how all our fathers were under the cloud, which is referring to the chariot that was leading us in the wilderness and passed through the sea, right, the Red Sea, which the Lord parted by the hand of Moses so we could cross through to escape the Egyptians. Verse 2, we're all baptized onto Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And here what it's saying is, it's not that Moses was like, putting their heads in water and physically baptizing them, but spiritually, right, in the sense that they were brought under the obedience and guidance or leadership of Moses. Okay, and as it says, in the cloud, which the cloud, we know that it was really Yahweh Shai that was in that cloud, that chariot, that was leading us. Okay, and Yahweh Shai represents the presence of the Lord. Okay, so really, it's not that Israel was actually in the chariot, but they were in the presence of the Lord. All right, and in the sea, which here he uses the historical account of us actually going through the sea, right, as likened onto, us entering into that baptism of the Lord, right, because that was when the Lord was delivering us up out from Egypt into the wilderness, all right, and then teaching us his ways, which a lot of Israelites failed terribly at learning those. Verse 3, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, right, going into that manna, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Hamashiach. See, so now a couple of things, right? When you go back into the wilderness, there is an account where the Lord caused Israel to get water, right? He caused Moses to, bring forth water from a rock to give them water to drink. Okay, but here Paul is saying that was symbolic, because that rock that was a spiritual thing, and where that spiritual rock was really representing Yahweh Shai, who was following them, i.e., leading them in the wilderness, being that angel in that chariot that was a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. But with many of them, God was not well pleased. See, so even though they were exposed to these miracles, right, and the actual live workings of the Lord, a lot of them still did not please the Lord, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. So a lot of them were destroyed in the wilderness for their disobedience. Now, these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. So these are examples, good examples for us to learn from, not to behave in the way they did, as they were unappreciative, they were hard-headed, they disobeyed the Lord, they wanted to do what they wanted to do. Neither be idolaters, as were some of them, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. And this was going back to the book of Exodus, when Moses went up to the mount to get the commandments for them. And you had certain of them, right, ringleaders of the people that decided to pressure Aaron into building that golden calf. And it says that they rose up and did all these things that Paul is describing here in worshiping that idol. Verse 8, neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Okay, which this was mainly spiritual fornication, right? A form of idolatry that was tied to physical actions. Now, I'm going to do a cross-reference here, and it should take us to that account, which I believe is in the book of Numbers. Yep, Numbers 25 and 1. I'll just read through it real briefly. And Israel abode in Shittim, and the people began to commit whoredom with the daughters of Moab. So they were being enticed by the daughters, the women of Moab, to the Moabite women to go a whoring after their gods. And they called the people onto the sacrifices of their gods, and the people did eat and bowed down to their gods. That was that fornication. And Israel joined himself unto Baal Peor, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel. And the Lord said unto Moses, take all the heads of the people, and meaning the leaders, the ringleaders that were pushing this, and hang them up before the Lord against the sun, that the fierce anger of the Lord may be turned away from Israel. So hang them right in broad daylight. And Moses said unto the judges of Israel, slay ye every one his men that were joined unto Baal Peor. So all those that were partaking of this idolatry, kill them all. And behold, one of the children of Israel came and brought unto his brethren a Midianitish woman in the sight of Moses, and in the sight of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping before the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. So while they were in mourning and weeping, concerning the wrath of the Lord that was upon them, you had this wicked Israelite that was busy still dealing with them, with those same women that were drawing them onto idols. So much so that he brought one into the camp. And when Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a javelin in his hand. And he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through. So he stabbed that javelin through the man and the woman. The man of Israel and the woman through her belly. So the plague was stayed from the children of Israel. And those that died in the plague were 24,000. So Paul is making reference to this account here. Now you notice he mentions there fell in one day 23,000. That's 23,000. But it's not really a discrepancy, because what Paul is saying here is in a day, right? 23,000 died. But the account we just read was in total 24,000 died. Okay, so as it says there, and all those that died in the plague were 24,000. Okay, but Paul's making emphasis here to say that at once, right, in the span of one day, the Lord took out 23,000 for judging them for this fornication they were committing. So let that be an example to us. Neither let us tempt Hamashiach, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed of serpents, right? Because they were murmuring and, tempting the Lord, and he sent those fiery or venomous snakes among them to bite them. Neither murmur ye, as some also murmured and were destroyed of the destroyer, and the destroyer is Yahushua. Remember, there's actually an account that the Lord was sending fire among them, right? Destroying, especially those on the outskirts. And where do you think that fire was coming from? But he was basically burning them up using Yahushua, because Yahushua is likened onto the destroyer. He is the one who leaped, as it tells you in the book of Wisdom of Solomon, into Egypt during that night, of the Passover and slew all the firstborn. Now all these things happened unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, for our exhortation, for our learning, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Right. So us that are living in the end of this age, these things are examples for us to learn from. Wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. So those that think they're, standing strong, you're doing everything right. You're perfect, right? Be careful lest you fall. Don't get high-minded. There have no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. So whatever trial or temptation you may go to, don't get overwhelmed, because this is not exclusive to just you. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able. Because everybody has, different weaknesses, and the same temptation on one brother might not work the same on another. But the Lord tempts us accordingly to try us for certain reasons. And he is also, as Paul said here, faithful. He's not tempting you to overthrow your faith, but he's always going to make a way for you to overcome it, right? He's going to tempt you with a temptation he knows you can overcome. But will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. See, so there's going to be some light at the end of the tunnel that the Lord is gonna put there to balance it out. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry, because that was something that was very heavy and prevalent around them in the city where they dwelt. So it was a big challenge that they had to overcome. I speak as unto wise men, judge ye what I say. So as Paul is saying here, in other words, you're reasonable people, right? So you can judge for yourselves, the truth of the matter that I'm speaking. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Hamashiach? And here he's talking about like the joining together to break bread in the spirit of Yahushai. As he's saying, the cup that we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Yahushai? The bread, and let's look into that word communion. It says here, fellowship, association, to share which one has, or the share which one has in anything, participation, right? So now if we, if we read this in the NLT, see how it's worded there. When we bless the cup at the Lord's table, aren't we sharing in Yahushai's blood, or in the blood of Yahushai? And when we break the bread, aren't we sharing in the body of Hamashiach? Which we are, right? Even, for example, when you take a look at the Passover, we drink the wine in symbolically representing the blood of the Lord, which is shed for us, and the bread symbolically representing his body, signifying that we are a part of Yahushai, or a part of the body of Yahushai, which Paul, is going to liken, the partaking of one bread to being of one body in Yahushai. Verse 17, for we being many are one bread and one body. So he likens us onto because in the ancient world, bread wasn't like today. You go to the store and you buy and it's sliced, right? You just two slices, you put the things in the middle and then you make a sandwich. No, in the ancient world, it was made one big, like a loaf, all right? And it was in a way where you could break it. That when they say break bread is quite literal. Like when you have unleavened bread, like what we use for the Passover, that's just an example. You break that, right? You don't cut it. It's broken. So he's but it's of one piece. It's one big piece that gets broken. So he's likening us to being like that one unified piece, that bread, or that one body, for we are all partakers of that one bread, which represents Yahushai's body. So being that we're all partakers of the same bread, it makes us of the same body, which is Yahushai. Behold, Israel after the flesh, are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? So here he uses the example, right, of the people of Israel, the nation of Israel, and the customs, and the, for lack of a better word, the religion of the Jews. right? Are not they which eat of the sacrifices partakers of the altar? And those that eat of the sacrifices, predominantly are the priests, right? In the law, it tells you that. And they partake of the altar, meaning they are the ones who are actually offering these sacrifices, right, on the altar. And what I mean by that is they're performing the actual labor or the service of, placing the actual offering on the sacrifice, the offering on the altar and preparing it and so on. What say I then? So Paul, he's saying all this, but he's saying, okay, so what is the point of all this, right? I'm saying all this to say what? That the idol is anything, or that which is offered in sacrifice to idols is anything? And these are rhetorical questions, right? Am I saying that idols exist, or they're real, or they have any power, right? Am I saying that things that are offered onto them have any significance? No. But I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to devils and not to God. So their idols are really just spirits of demons. They're not an actual God. It's not to the Most High. And I would not that ye should have fellowship with devils. See? So he's letting them know that, look, at the end of the day, yes, you have liberty in Yahushua, right? And those of you that understand, you know how to maneuver in this world. But also keep in mind that these idols are really, when they sacrifice onto them, they're sacrificing onto devils. So don't be associated with that. Not even if in your mind you're thinking, oh, well, I know I believe in Yahushua, but there's a limit, okay, in where to balance out your liberty in Yahushua. You don't want to, get too comfortable. And now you're, getting to the point where, as he mentioned, you're dealing so closely, whether it's in the temple, whether you're saying, I'm just going to go there, get some food or whatever the case is. Keep in mind that these practices they're doing is fellowshipping with these devils, right? These demons. And you are of a different spirit. So you have to abstain from that. Verse 21, ye cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of devils. See, because he just mentioned above about drinking of the cup, right, of the Lord, breaking the bread. So you eat at the Lord's table. You can't go and eat at the devil's table as well. If you fellowship with the believers in Yahushua, you can't be over there in the temple eating of their sacrifices, because then that's likened unto you fellowshipping with them. Ye cannot be partakers of the Lord's table and of the devil's table. And really what Paul is getting at here is you have to serve one master, which is the Lord. And you have to be very mindful of that and how you serve the Lord. Do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? So what's going to happen? Because that's what happened in the wilderness. They provoked the Lord to jealousy because they were joining themselves. As it says, Israel was joined to Baal Peor, and the Lord got jealous. He was angry at that. So here, Paul is warning, saying, be careful, with how you deal around these temples, the things that are, the sacrifices that they do and the things that they partake in. Be very careful, lest you inadvertently or, unawares end up provoking the Lord to jealousy, thinking that you have spiritual superiority, so it's okay, it doesn't affect you. But the actions you take have a spiritual consequence or repercussion with it. So as Paul is saying, are we stronger than he? Rhetorical question, because the answer is no. All things are lawful for me. And whenever Paul says this, when you look in some of the other translations, they make it clearer that he's quoting, something that they would say as justification for the things that they would do. So if I pull this up here, like in the NLT, it says, right, you say I am allowed to do anything. That's the all things are lawful for me. But then Paul responds to it, but all things are not expedient. So he makes his point, he gives some examples, and then he brings it back to that phrase that they would say to show, like, this is what I mean, right? This is why I explained the things above, to show you that, yes, there are certain things that are lawful and you can do, but it's not expedient. It's not wise. It's not the best thing to do in this moment, because it can have repercussions. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. See? Yeah, there may be certain things that you're allowed to do, but it's not all that are going to be edifying or promote the building or strengthening of the body. Let no man seek his own, but every man another's wealth, and or in other words, another's well-being. And that also goes back to what the Apostle Paul mentioned a chapter or two ago about being mindful of your liberty in Yahushai, and that being a stumbling block onto another brother whose conscience may be weaker. Whatsoever is sold in the shambles, that eat, asking no question for conscience sake. And the shambles are the marketplace, because in Corinth, and even here in America today, and other parts of the world, it's like that. But they would oftentimes the food and the meats they would have in the marketplace were from sacrifices that were made in the temple, and then they were sold in these marketplaces. So Paul is saying here, look, when you go to buy meat, when you buy it, just buy it. Don't go prying into, well, what was this sacrificed onto an idol? Where did this come from? And because what that's going to do is going to now, play on your conscience. All right. And so to be freed from that mental guilt of hearing something you may not have heard or have wanted to hear, just buy it and go and, pray over it and consume it. Because at the end of the day, verse 26, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Right. So at the end of the day, everything really belongs to the Most High anyway. The animal before it was killed, it's really provisioned by the Lord anyway. OK, so it says here, verse 27, if any of them that believe not bid you to a feast, so one that is without, an unbeliever, they invite you, right? Maybe to their house, to a dinner, to something, and ye be disposed to go, so you accept it and you're willing to go. Whatsoever is set before you, eat, asking no question for conscience sake. There, you need to be able to read between the lines here, right? This is obviously within the bounds of, Paul is not saying if they throw a squid and a live snake and freaking camel toes, or not that kind, but an actual camel's feet on your plate, obviously you're not going to eat that. Okay. But what he's saying here is within the realms of what makes sense, to eat. If they let's say they put some lamb or some chicken or some beef as part of the meal. If you were invited to somebody's baby shower, right, or some party, like some get together, and they have like an assortment of different foods over there, right? You get there and you see, okay, all right, and you may look and you may say, okay, let me make sure there's no abominable things in here. Let me not get the shrimp or the pork, but they got some chicken here, right? They got some lamb. You're not gonna go to the host and say, yo, by the way, which store did you buy this from? Do you know if this was one of those stores where they sacrifice the chickens to those other gods and stuff? There's no need for all of that for your conscience sake. Because what if they tell you, yeah, you know what? I actually got it from I stood right there and watched them do the whole sacrifice. Now your head is gonna be messed up, especially if you done eaten it. You're gonna have that it's gonna mess with your head. At least for those that Paul's giving this advice, because you had some that were not spiritually mature on that level yet to understand that these idols are nothing. And so you being a believer in the Lord and praying, and you can eat it like it's regular food. You're not in the spirit of offering this to an idol, so it doesn't affect you. But not everybody was on that level to understand that. So just to, absolve you of any mental guilt, just eat it like it's regular food. Don't try to do too much. But if any man say unto you, this is offered in sacrifice unto idols, eat not for his sake that shewed it, and for conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Now here in verse 28, really it's about if a believer points it out, because somebody that is in the world, chances of them coming to tell you this, it's not like, unless they're like, hey, by the way, two cases, right? By the way, I know you into that, the stuff that you believe. So just a heads up, like this is, say, something that was, when I bought it, I noticed this is one of the lambs that they used for the sacrifice that they did before they brought it here, or something like that, right? In that case, if it's a one that is a unbeliever that's pointing it out as it says, for the sake of him that showed it and for conscience sake, right, to not misrepresent the gospel, because not all men have the knowledge to understand, like, okay, I know this doesn't really affect me because of, the walk that I'm in, right? I know that the Lord has really covered me and he knows my heart. But not everybody understands that. So to those that are without, it may look like, wait, I thought you were, abstaining from these things. How come you claim to be a believer in this gospel? And is that really okay according to your standards and belief? Like those things, you don't want that to be a case, right? To misrepresent the gospel. But at the same time, right, if it is one that is a believer that is pointing this out, you want to be mindful there as well, right? Because they might, if they point that out to you and you're just like, yeah, whatever, you dog it down anyway, they might get the wrong idea. And they may be younger in the faith and their conscience might be messed up because they might say, okay, well, I guess let me just eat it then. But they're not eating it with the understanding that you have. They're eating it, and in their back of their minds, they're thinking, damn, I'm eating something that's offered onto an idol. Am I partaking in idolatry? And that starts to mess with their conscience. So as the Apostle Paul is saying here, in cases like this, don't eat it. For the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Conscience, I say, not thine own, but of the other. See? So for the conscience of, let's say, one that is weaker in the faith, that may point this out to you for their sake, along the same lines of what Paul was saying a couple chapters ago, that if meat offend my brother, I'm not going to eat any meat, right? Roughly paraphrasing. So for their sake, you do this. And then in verse 29, he's like, this is like almost anticipating like the kind of pushback or response, right? Which is like, well, you would think, well, for why is my liberty judged of another man's conscience? Like, why should my liberty be based on, okay, just because they don't understand, why do I have to limit the things that I can do and cannot do because of that? But then he explains, as he goes down into 31, for if I by grace be a partaker, right? If through grace of the Lord, I'm a partaker of this, of whatever it is here that I'm doing, why am I evil spoken of for that which I give thanks? Because ultimately I pray to the Lord and give thanks to him for it. So why would somebody look at me like I'm going off or I'm evil for that? But verse 31, whether therefore ye eat or drink or whatsoever ye do all to the glory of God. So the overall point here is that the believers should be, you gotta sometimes limit the legitimate freedom that you have, right? Your liberty, when exercising it, if that situation that you're exercising it in is going to harm somebody else's conscience, okay, or is going to misrepresent the gospel, then you got to be mindful of that. So that's why he says, it's everything you do it to the glory of God. Give none offense, neither to the Jews, nor to the Gentiles, nor to the church of God. Even as I please all men in all things, not seeking mine own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. And Paul gave examples of that. Yes, there are many things he could have done. There are things that, were within his power and realm to do, but he didn't. He limited his liberty or his rights for the sake that others might profit, that they might be saved. So I'm going to read this in the NLT, and then we'll close it out. I too try to please everyone in everything I do. I don't just do what's best for me. I do what is best for others, so that many may be saved. Because that's the ultimate priority, right? Suffer all things for the elect's sake. And that brings us to the end of the book of 1 Corinthians, the 10th chapter. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.